and that means around 6 months a year since 2021, which was the original finding of non-compliance, youth have had to experience these less than bare minimum conditions, which includes infrequent safety checks and resulting in youth having to urinate in their cells, lack of visitation, sporadic educational programming and other programming, visitation revoked, sexual abuse. Over 3,000 cases claims have been made to LA County gladiator style fights, that one of which was caught on video last year, and drugs being brought to the facilities, which resulted in the overdose and the passing away of a young person, Brian Diaz, last year. Furthermore, the racial makeup of LA County's detention facilities and the absurdly slow case processing further highlights the failures of the system, both the pervasive institutionalized racism and also the lack of investment in community alternatives that could be supporting youth who are navigating the system rather than resorting to detention. So 96% of youth in LA County facilities are Black or brown, and Black youth are 22 times more likely than white youth to be imprisoned pre-adjudication. And based on data from the LA County Probation Oversight Commission, the average length of stay for young people pre-adjudication in the juvenile hall is 5 months, whereas the national average stay is 27 days. And from my personal work with youth inside Los Padrinos, I can tell you many of them have spent years inside, waiting for the finalization of their cases and their placements. So it's become abundantly clear that LA County Probation cannot be responsible for caring for youth. The system continues to perpetuate harms, but it also continues to be invested in. We're not seeing the investment in the alternatives, which I'll touch on later, that are so crucial to truly generating safety and supporting the healing and the care of our young people. And a major way we need to start to change these primary issues and focus on the solutions is divesting from the budget. So LA County has a budget of $45 billion, which is more than the federal DOJ budget. It's a ton of money, and 11.5 billion of that is net county costs, which means they're taxpayer dollars. So it's entirely up to the discretion of the Board of Supervisors on how they want to use those dollars. And that's important because that means the way those dollars are being spent reflects their priorities. So when we think about LA County's specifically juvenile probation budget, actually the LA County budget hearing right now to finalize the budget for this fiscal year is going on right now. And the CEO has recommended around $440 million, which is the highest on record juvenile institutions budget. And 74% of that is net county costs. And it costs right now $855,215 to incarcerate one youth for 1 year in LA County. That translates to sending 6 kids for 4 years to UCLA. So it's an enormous investment, a massively bloated investment in a system that we know does not work. And then lastly, I want to touch on lack of coordination. In order for the alternatives to grow and effectively support youth, there needs to be investment and empowerment and their success, but we continue to see the system impede the development of the alternatives that we're trying to build out. So whether that be the Credible Messenger program, which has been widely adopted by LA counties, explicitly mandated by the Board of Supervisors, it's a strategy that's agreed upon. It's individuals with lived experience with the justice system who are trained and equipped to work with young people and provide transformational mentorship inside juvenile facilities. They've had trouble having clearance and access to these facilities because probation continues to hold the key and has the ultimate kind of say of who's going inside. Another example is distribution of Juvenile Justice Crime Prevention Act funds. Ready to Rise is funding that supports youth development services all across LA County, educational, wellness, leadership, workforce development, whatever it may be. And $100 million of those JJCPA funds going through Ready to Rise were not able to be invested last year. They were delayed by a year because of data requirements that probation was requesting that was identifiable data for young people. So we can just see overall that deep coordination, relationship building, cultural shift, and transformation is absolutely necessary for us to shrink the systems while growing out the alternatives. So the alternatives that I really want to touch on are prevention, diversion, and also youth empowerment and support teams. And the underlying need for building out effective alternatives, as I said, is substantial investment. So it's not just financially, but also capacity-wise, energy-wise, and in terms of power sharing. So first with youth diversion, sorry, if you could just go back one slide or 2 slides. With youth diversion, LA County Department of Youth Development recently released a diversion report that details the impacts of diversion from 2019 to 2022. And the major takeaway is it's clear diversion works. We know it's effective in supporting youth. It's cost effective. It generates safety and reduces future harm. Some of the major highlights they uplift are 95% of youth enrolled in diversion stay out of trouble with the legal system. 5 out of 5 key protective factors or psychosocial factors that influence youth development are seen to be improved for both youth and families. But I want to get a bit more granular with some of the information about the diversion data and also where we go from here, because it's a bit more nuanced than just diversion works. And diversion absolutely needs to be mandated and available across the state. But when we think about LA County, what we're noticing is that Black youth are not being offered diversion as an option nearly as often as white or brown youth. So the result is access to diversion is much lower for Black youth. Same with enrollment. So Black youth and their families are just not enrolling as often. And it's important to us to reconsider outreach and communication around diversion, especially bringing in community voice to better understand how Black youth can be better connected with these opportunities. Despite this decreased access and enrollment, Black youth who do enroll in diversion actually complete programming at an equal rate or greater than white youth. So it really is just about this access. And then also, sorry, I don't know if you're able to go back to the slide. There's a graph I wanted to show about disaggregated recidivism data around diversion. I'll pause for a second just to see.
Ms. Shields, while you're waiting, I just want to give you a heads up. You have about 2 minutes.
Okay, thanks. Well, I can just continue to explain it. I don't want to. I know we have other panelists, wonderful panelists who have a lot to share, so I can just continue to share. So there's, if you look at the diversion report, there is a graph that shows disaggregated recidivism data over 6 months. And you can see on that graph that if you look at the alleged SADS offense, 100% of youth who enroll in diversion don't recidivate, but also 100% who don't enroll in diversion don't recidivate. But when you look at alleged felonies, you see about an 11% difference. So 95% of youth who enroll in diversion don't recidivate within 6 months, whereas it's 84 without diversion. So I think what's so key about this is that diversion is impactful, especially impactful for youth with the most serious offenses. And these are often youth who have really complex cases, who may be gang involved, who may be involved in the child welfare system. So it's super important that we're giving these opportunities for young people who have these most serious offenses to have these opportunities go through diversion and through these alternatives, and really be tailoring these resources for these young people without net widening. Youth development networks as well, I think, are super important part of Youth Justice Reimagined. It is pretty much what it sounds like. Youth development networks is a network of youth development resources, but it's more than just contracts. It's more than just financial investment, but it's really investment in the individuals within the communities where these youth development networks are going to live. And it requires a cultural shift. Right now, the status quo, which is very much rooted in white supremacy, is about investing in institutions, systems, and centralizing power. But the youth development networks imagine something entirely different, where it's completely based on relationships. So there's a need to build up the basis in communities, political education of community leaders, residents, and young people, most importantly. And it looks like a lot of investment of an energy, intention, and capacity building for these individuals who are leading these organizations as a part of the youth development networks. And then beyond that, then you can take it to an organizational level where these individuals can then learn how to navigate a system that's not built for them and be able to secure funding and interface with folks in power and continually use their skills to meet whatever moment is necessary. And then lastly, I know I'm almost out of time.
Yeah,
I'll just touch
right.
on youth. I'll just touch
Yes,
on
you
youth.
have to wrap
Yes,
up.
teams really briefly. Youth empowerment and support teams. They're teams of individuals from the communities that they serve. They have relationships with the young people. They put young people at the center, and they respond, whether it's within the system, but the team that I'm working on developing in South Central is actually preventative, outside of the system, responding to crises. And the most important part, just like youth development networks, is all about the cultural shift and focus on relationship building and putting the young person at the center, and having this healing-centered approach towards accountability and safety. I'll pause there.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you so very much. That was so informative. And the board has requested that any of the panelists that have written information, that if you are willing to share it with us, we would like to pass that on. And then also at the end of this, you may have a couple of minutes to add to your comments in the Q&A with the board members. Thank you so much again, Ms. Shields. Now I'd like to turn to Ms. Gina Warren, who is the CEO and co-founder of Neighborhood Wellness. Good morning or good afternoon, Ms. Warren. You are on.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Dr. Gina Warren. I am the co-founder and executive director of Neighborhood Wellness Foundation, and on behalf of our organization, we thank you for this opportunity. At this time, I'd like to share with you a video that we created. If you guys can do that on the next slide.
What do you think it's like for us kids to live the way we are forced to live. I shouldn't have to walk past dead teenagers on Black Friday shopping at the mall.
We dream too. We have goals too. We're not labels, disadvantaged, underprivileged. We are people who were born black and brown and poor. Our parents were too, and so are our grandparents. They don't pay for our schools, our clothes, our phones. I work 3 jobs so I can fulfill my dreams. We are dying waiting for someone else who doesn't even live this way to decide when and how many resources we need.
I want to know how you see us because how you see us determines how you treat us. Stop saying what's wrong with those people and start asking us what happened.
Every day, we walk with our brothers and sisters, young and old, who wear masks of pain the world cannot see. Our family survives daily in toxic spaces, wounded, broken, yet resilient. We are without resources to provide basic, healthy living and learning spaces for ourselves and for our children.
We're mislabeled, misunderstood, without the freedom to just be kids.
Like, you can't just be riding your bike around any neighborhood anymore because you don't gotta be politicking or be gang bang, but it's just the people that you hang around. You don't.
Racism, trauma, and poverty. Just living in our neighborhood affects our mental health. It's why it's hard to stay in school, why we search for family and ending up joining gangs, why we have legacies of addiction and legacies of incarceration instead of legacies of Harvard, Yale, and Princeton.
Our life conditions should have been deemed a public health crisis a long time ago. Black and brown lives have been blanketed by America's institutionalized racial covenants as best practices, redlining, strategically manufactured urban poverty, dehumanizing living conditions, underfunded schools, suboptimal delivery of health care, minimal employment opportunities. We internalize this impact, creating a mental sky of unworthiness, invisibility, inferiority, anger, frustration. We bottle it up and search for a way to release it.
The crack cocaine epidemic and gang violence magnified our trauma as we search for pathways of financial relief and for temporary relief of the memories that imprisoned our minds and infected our bodies. This warfare left Del Paso Heights and Strawberry Manors with the dehumanizing social structures leaving patterns unimaginable. Childhood adversities that almost destroyed our village and family units. Why were we abandoned without any supported resources to help us with the addiction in our neighborhoods?
The casualties of this war are our children. The architecture of the young developing brain were not designed by families talking over dinner, hugs, and bedtime stories.
We survive in deplorable housing conditions with infestations of roaches and rats, exposed to unhealthy food and drinking water, without spaces to learn. Our children are engulfed in fear, rocked to sleep at night by an orchestra of helicopters, gunfire, sirens, drunken fists, and unwanted hands, or left alone with the deafening silence of abandonment.
Yet we expect the kids to rise in the early morning with empty bellies, without a bath, filthy clothes, ashamed, filled with anxiety and stress. No one at school asking them what happened. They only say, "What's wrong with you?" and expect our children to focus and learn. Positive attitudes and social skills never modeled.
Those of us who survive in adulthood become parents without the capacity to parent, without basic skills and desperation to survive. Individual trauma implodes and collective results in an eruption of neighborhood trauma, especially inside an airtight cage of poverty.
When we struggle in silence, our mental health trauma imperceptibly passes generationally.
Our trauma shows up as angry, violent at home or on the street, working the street, failing in school, disruptive in school, or cutting ourselves, in prison or dead.
Look at the patterns and the common denominators in our neighborhoods. Understand the mechanisms that create them. Learn the insidious ways in which the daily onslaught of structural racism and chronic toxic adversity undermines learning and impacts mental health, physical health, and socioeconomic mobility.
Well, Neighborhood Wellness was started in 2015 when Gina and I got together and really wanted to provide some support to the neighborhood. We initially thought we would just be connecting people to resources because we thought there was just a lack of connection. But as we gathered our neighbors together to start this program, we realized it was much deeper than that.
And that's when we recognized that intergenerational trauma and poverty was at the root of the challenges, of the disparities. Thank you. Next slide, Aisha. So I want you guys to understand that we created the video to provide context to the data. We hear a lot about data, and it's important because most people respond to that. But we need you to see us beyond numbers. We need you to see a mere glimpse of human suffering that is associated with generational experiences that create those patterns of disparities. And so what we did is we created 4 impact programs, and Restore Legacies is one of them, but it incorporates 4 components of what we do. So it is established for those struggling with substance use disorders, those formerly incarcerated, those who have been heavily gang involved, and those who are just, most of them homeless, and just struggling with the system and then not going to school, and or high levels of truancy, poor academic performance. Next slide. So 4 components that are absolutely necessary, what we're finding based on the work that we've already implemented, is mental health, education, socioeconomic stability, and collaborative partnerships. Next slide. So mental health, it is the #1 request based on our youth from a student needs assessment report done by UC Davis. And from the result of that, we created what we call a Pacers Take Space, which is a school-based health center at Grant High School, which is a block away from our community center that offers behavioral health, mental health. We respond a lot to shootings in the neighborhood, shooting that happen at our campus, the fightings, the substance use disorders. And so many of the wonderful panelists have already stated, we are using less police and focusing more on behavioral health support, creating these healing circles that you see here with the adults, but we also do it twice weekly at our school-based health center. But here, at our community center, the majority of the folks that are in that room are formerly incarcerated, heavily gang affiliated, substance use disorder, history of drug use, drug trafficking. And we come together to have very raw and uncut conversation about life and how we ended up here. It's educational, it's supportive, but it's a sacred place that we created that releases a lot of rage, a lot of pent up anger and frustration, and then helps people go on a pathway towards healing and capacity building. Next slide. The second, and this is what we do with the youth. And this happened during a surge in violence during 2020, the pandemic, which you'll see some of the people having masks on. They called that emergency healing circle because a 9-year-old was shot in our community, and also the Black Friday situation where some of our kids were present, and they had to walk past the 2 teenagers that were in the mall. They're struggling to articulate, they're struggling to process, and we needed to create that space for the youth, as we do with the adults, to allow them to express themselves, and then we can intervene and talk about pathways that are healthy, that are not screaming, that are not yelling, that are not being violent, that doesn't also result into substance use disorder. Next slide. So we also educate, and we know the correlation between low educational attainment and incarceration. And actually the gardening is learning about gardening, but it's also very therapeutic. We have mental health forums, which you see on the bottom. We also have conversations about the fentanyl crises, Narcan administration, and how they can become empowered. But every time we have education, it's always about situations that are endemic in our neighborhood, from the high rise of chlamydia and syphilis to the gun violence and ACEs. They learn a lot about adverse childhood experiences, the impact, and ways that they can actually disrupt the cycle. Next slide. We also participate in asthma. Asthma is a big problem in our neighborhood. We have conversations with a lot of our navigators, with the youth, and we also are involved in getting some development and relationship building with the police department. So not just that we learn about them, but most importantly, that they learn about us and our community, and I'll elaborate that more on that in the future slides. Next slide.
Dr. Warren, we're just about out of time. So if you could wrap up, that would be fabulous.
Okay,
Thank you.
so this is our staff who 110 years combined of incarceration. And we have invested back into this staff. And in doing so, they are peer support specialists, community health workers, they are mentors, they are neighborhood navigators that are stopping the fentanyl, or addressing the fentanyl crisis, stopping and reversing opioid overdoses, they're mitigating violence. And the April downtown shooting in Sacramento, the gang retaliation would have happened had we not had our staff on board that created emergency healing circles to prevent the retaliation. And so I just want you guys to really begin to focus in on what happened, begin to have conversations with our youth and stop looking at them, what's wrong with them, what happened to them, learn and understand the generational impact of trauma, not just for our youth, but those who serve our youth, because trauma is from the resident to the president. It's just the only difference is that resources allow those who are serving and those who have money and are educated to help hide their trauma versus those who are struggling with resources and are unable to do so. And so I would love to, and I thought we had about 7 more minutes, but if we could engage in that kind of type of conversation so we can come to solutions.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for the presentation, the video. And again, please keep your camera on because the board will, I'm sure, have some questions. Thank you so much, Dr. Warren. Our final speaker for this panel is Ms. Nancy Juarez, Policy and Communications Analyst at the Center on Juvenile and Criminal Justice. Ms. Juarez, welcome.
Thank you so much. So much gratitude to be here. My name is Nancy Juarez. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a policy analyst with the Center on Juvenile and Criminal Justice. Oh my goodness, I'm in a room with such powerful people. I just have to acknowledge, Gina, everything that you just shared right now. Wow, I'm really like, my brain is like, run it back. Like, I want to keep your words forever with me in my heart, and I will, and I'm going to walk with those words. Thank you for all of the work you're doing. Very grateful for this board. I'm very grateful for Ronnie from Hoops for Justice for inviting me to be a voice in this space. I'm grateful for Dudane, everything that him and Urban Peace Movement are doing in Oakland, California. I'm grateful for Jasmine, who has roots in Stockton, but let me tell you, Jasmine is up and down the state, going to court hearings for young people from up north, down south, everywhere and in between. Annalisa from Santa Clara, she's also doing statewide work, but like really so rooted in the work locally as well. Olivia, I see you in the work all the time on the policy side of things. So I guess it's an acknowledgement to just say, like, you know, when I see folks in the movement and then I see them in a space like this, great, we keep seeing one another, must mean we're on the right path somewhere. And I'm grateful to be just building alongside y'all. Aisha, Danielle, Kendall, thank you for inviting me as well. So as I was saying, I'm a policy analyst with the Center on Juvenile and Criminal Justice. And we work a lot with data, right? And we know that data is just a part of, it's a tool to telling the story, to telling the truth, right? Data is just a tool, but it's really like the context, the narrative, the story, the spirit behind the number, which is why I'm very grateful to you, Gina, for including that in your presentation. When we showed, so we are part of, CJCJ is a part of a campaign called the All Youth Are Sacred campaign. This name was created by young people. We were in space, and it's what fit after, you know, being in space and dialogue with one another. All youth are sacred. And what does a California that treats all youth as sacred look like? What does a world that treats all youth as sacred look like? And the first thing we started off with is with data. And we showed, I'm sorry, y'all don't have a slide to show you, but if you could imagine like a roller coaster at Six Flags going way up high in the 90s and skyrocketing down, that is what crime trends look like for young people. Young people are not in the system anymore. They are in the free community. Yet the resources continue to funnel towards the system. And this is happening across the country, not just in California, right? So I'm talking about Humboldt County has 6 young people in their hall. There are counties that are already closing down their halls and creating like halls with neighboring counties in adjustment to this. So, I mean, I'm really amazed by this. I have my notes here, so I'll be going back and forth. I'm amazed by this generation because from the 90s to see this crime trend, right? Like young people are outside. And I want to, when we first presented this during the All Youth Are Sacred convening, there was a young person from Stockton. He had his sunglasses on. I think he even like put them down for a second and was like, hold on. This is not what I hear though. Like they make us sound so bad. They make us sound like we're messing up left and right. Like, but it's not us. Like we're not the problem. But the data says they're not the problem, right? But the story, the narrative, what we tell them they are, bad, problem, guilty, is not what's reflected, right? And it's not reflected in our policies. It's not reflected in our investment. It's not reflected. We just saw the photos, right, from Neighborhood Wellness. That's an archive of what their communities look like. Who's investing in their community, right? Like, where are the resources? And even with that, look at all that Neighborhood Wellness is doing, right? Because we're going to take anything we have and flip it and turn it into lemonade, and that's just how our communities serve one another. So yes, when we, sorry, just coming back here. So when we continue to invest, right, into a carceral system versus community solutions, what does that tell them? What does that say, like, towards young people, right? Like, you're not worthy of a second chance. You're bad, you're guilty, you're so bad and guilty that you deserve abuse. You deserve pepper spray. You deserve to be shackled. And how, when you've been dealt with, when you've been hurt with that abuse, when you've been given that abuse, how do you remember that you're sacred, right? When all those actions have just told you otherwise. And when folks come home, supporting folks coming home, right, so that they can get that healing. Because once you've endured that, that's now forever your path is going to be towards healing that abuse. And so we worked a lot. CJ, we have a program called DDAP. And it is a diversion program. We work with direct file young people. We don't just work with young people who are in San Francisco, like truancy or misdemeanors. No, we work with those charges, those hard charges, and it's a way to show, like, the answer is not to criminalize young people. Instead, let's bring them into the community and let's wrap around them, right? And I had heard earlier in the presentation during panel 2, a chief had said, the irony is, like, we have to show up to a call. Like, it's our job. Like, we were not built to be the first call when something happens, and yet sometimes we are the first and only call, you know? So, but there are jobs, what I'm hearing right now, and I would love to hear more, Gina, about your staff, where people want to be that first call, where people are eager to be that first call, where people are eager to go inside the halls. I know brothers who were serving life that have now come home, never thought they were going to come home. And now they're rushing to do their programming inside the halls. And they're like laughing, like, dang, I was so desperate to get out. I never thought I'd be like rushing to go back to serve young people, because they see themselves in them, right? They healed. It's a miracle that they made it out. And so now it's like we have to pass those teachings forward, because we genuinely have a real chance to end youth incarceration in California and across the country. These numbers of young people, I'm talking, it's a steep decline, like 6 young people in Humboldt County. Who are their aunties? Who are their relatives that we can get in touch with? Who are their family members where we can build that connection, so that it's not the cop, right? It's not that first call. Instead, and it's not to say it's never this, right? That's why I love this board, and I love this conversation. I know it's a presentation, but it feels like a conversation with you all to creatively think about, like, hey, like, look, I want your first call to be when you get a call from a family member saying, hey, let's go to the beach, that you could say yes to it. But instead, I hear a lot of probation officers, a lot of law enforcement officers, tired, overworked. Across the state and country, there's a staff shortage. You cannot pay people enough to be in these halls, in these facilities. What does that say about the conditions that young people have to be in when they're there? When I go visit my father, it's like, my father's currently incarcerated. The guards are ready. They're tired. They want to go home. Their best years are spent inside, right? Guarding my family member from me while they themselves are away from their family member, working overnight shifts, right? So, and I know we've all seen that in the headlines, right? So it's time that we reshape, and we have a real opportunity to reshape what we invest in, right? Jobs that bring meaning and purpose, jobs that we don't have to spend time away from our family members, instead that we can build together and collectively. And young people have a lot of answers for the future, because they are the future, and they have a lot of answers to solve things like poverty. um, third spaces is so important. Like, I was reading the RIPA report, and I'm going to wrap up in a second. I'm reading the RIPA report, and I'm seeing how many young people are stopped by traffic incidences. Growing up, I'm 26 years old, at, you know, not too far away from early 20s, but the car was a third space. It's a safe space. It's a space away from the household that can often, being out of the house sometimes was protection, right? But then, then you're also faced with, like, so all that to say, like, third spaces are so important, and there's such a lack of spaces. UPM, Urban Peace Movement, I saw the space that they have their young people in. They're in the We office building. We Space office building. It's like co-working space. They have kombucha. When I walked in there, I was like, this is better than my organization's office. Like, that, what does that say about, for a young person to see themselves reflected? And, like, yeah, I deserve this, right? Like, I deserve, I am sacred. So, um, I say so much more. CJ, we have a program also called Cameo House that serves the mother, the matriarch of a family. It's an alternative to incarceration. Mothers are in the heart of the Mission District, San Francisco. They have access to therapy, 2 years of housing. Then we work with them afterwards for sustainable housing. And our evaluations is like 100% graduation, right? 100% finding housing afterwards in a place like San Francisco. So it's really just like meeting people's needs. How can we meet people's needs? And there's enough to do that. A billion in Los Angeles to lock up a young person, 800,000, I believe, in San Francisco. It may be more since we last did it. So we can direct resources. There is a way to solve, and we have DDAP programs that show it. Diversion program within CJ. We have Cameo House that gets to the entire family village. And then I'll wrap up by saying, there was a question asked that said, does it have anything to do, like, the crime trends, whether it's a single parent or a 2-parent household? I learned from Arnold Paul Chandler from Organizing Roots that the trajectory of a young person is often not about the single person household, but it is about whether that community, that neighborhood, how many moms are in that neighborhood. So that is to say, how is the wellness of the village, not just the household, but of the entire village? Is that village doing well? Is it well resourced? Are there aunties there? How many adult figures are there, right? So
Ms. Juarez, I am so sorry. Thank you so much. If you could just really wrap up very quickly, but remember that the board wants to hear more from you through the Q&A that's going to start shortly.
Yes, I just, the answer is really investing in our wellness and community wellness, neighborhood wellness in the village, because it takes a village to raise a child. Thank y'all.
Thank you. Thank you so much to all of the panelists. And now I will turn the floor back over to our esteemed RIPA board co-chairs, Angela Sierra and Andrea Guerrero, to open it up for a few questions and answers for this esteemed panel.
Great, thank you, Aisha, and to our panelists. Thank you so much for your presentations, for being here, for sharing with us, and just the incredible work that you are doing. And what is just really resonated with me is all of you have kind of touched upon, that we all are just really helped in this whole, in our endeavors, really helped by thinking about the context and really understanding the context for the data that we are looking at. So really, thank you so much. I'm going to open it up to our board members to ask questions and provide comments. We have 20 minutes to do so, so we have until about 10 to 2. So if any board member would like to contribute or have a question for our panelists, let's go forward with that. Let's see. I have a question from Chief Dulas.
Hello and good afternoon. everybody. So I just had a question for Ms. Shields because I was trying to keep up on the 45 billion spending for LA County. Were you referencing their total budget?
Yes, I wanted to give some context just how many available dollars there are in LA County overall for investment. So the entire total budget is around $45 billion, yes. And then specifically, if you look at probation, it's 1.1 billion, and then juvenile institutions is 440 million.
Yeah, okay, good. I just wanted to verify that's what I came up with and just making sure I was following you. And thank you for your presentation.
See, we also have a question from Dr. Dobar.
Thank you. Just want to echo appreciation for the panelists joining us today, sharing your perspectives and wisdom. This question is for Ms. Shields, but other panelists should feel free to chime in if you have perspectives on it. So Ms. Shields, you mentioned the need to invest in prevention, diversion, and youth empowerment. Can you say a bit more about, are there any particular diversion programs or prevention programs that are showing particular types of success, or ones that are showing the most promise?
Yeah, thank you so much for that question. I would say in terms of diversion programs, what we're seeing is the community-based organizations that have been doing diversion work for decades in LA County, Centinela Youth Services, CCEJ, the California Community for Equality and Justice, sorry, acronyms, but these organizations that have really deep-seated and deep-rooted connections with the communities that they serve, as well as connections with the law enforcement agencies that are doing this diversion, are incorporated throughout this diversion report as being abundantly effective. I mean, if you look at the data that's illustrated throughout the report, we're really seeing how impactful diversion is in addressing the racial component of young people being disproportionately involved in the juvenile justice system. But I think what's really important beyond expanding diversion throughout LA County and expanding to all the different law enforcement agencies is also investing, like I said, in Youth Justice Reimagined and some of what we haven't had data for yet, but we know works because we know that, one, it's coming from the young people who have experienced these systems themselves. It's coming from the providers who are doing the youth development kind of work right now in our communities, but just need that initial investment or funding or opportunity to capacity build so that we can then be able to track that data and see the success of what's happening. So what I touched upon, Youth Development Networks, is a great example of that, being led by the Department of Youth Development. Right now, they're being launched in 5 regions, so Long Beach, Pacoima, South Central, East LA, and Antelope Valley. And as I said, what we're anticipating with these youth development networks is being different than just blanket financial investment in communities, is that there's also this additional request from the community consultants who are leading this work to have investment in the relationship building. So like I said, the connective tissue that is really going to make the difference in terms of supporting young people. So if a youth is in crisis, oftentimes it's not just one thing that they need addressed. There may be a plethora of things that they're going through. So having these youth development networks that are able to give these warm handoffs to each other. So when a young person is connected with one resource, they're connected with a whole network of resources. That being one of the, I think, main opportunities for prevention that is just now up and coming in LA, but doesn't have the data yet. Because it's just beginning. And then also youth empowerment and support teams as a preventative measure. It's kind of similar to what Nancy was touching upon around crisis response. There are folks who have lived experience who are working in their communities right now as community violence interventionists who understand the neighborhood dynamics, who have connections with these young people and with their families, who are trained and equipped to be able to respond to crises that occur, incidences that occur, but to approach accountability and approach safety in a way that is more so addressing the root causes and the root needs for young people versus punishment and surveillance, which is what we do right now as a status quo. So I think yes teams and youth development networks, I will talk about them all day long, but those are 2 of the most important initiatives I think that need that initial investment in order to show that kind of success that diversion is showing right now.
Can I add to that, please?
Yes, absolutely.
So we have two programs that we work with as a diversion program. One is Restore Legacies, the other. I'm sorry? So my point is, as a clinician, is that we always get history, right? When we need to make a diagnosis before we can make a treatment, right? You get family history, you get risk factors, but we don't do that with our folks who've been formerly incarcerated. We don't ask what their literacy level is of their families. What are their risk factors? Who are they with? What are the challenges? What kind of abuse they suffered? And they have a lot of our kids, when we speak with them, you learn more about what the challenges are. You can't treat and throw programs at kids if you don't even understand what the problem is. That's just like me looking at you and wanting to give you a blood pressure med, and I have no idea what's going on with you, but I'm just going to kind of guess. And we do that often. And that's why we're seeing our children are running around. They are relying on adults to be strategic, to be intentional, and to be thought-provoking in terms of critical thinkers, in terms of how do I address the issue of poverty and trauma. And if we don't spend time talking to those who suffer and then listening to the adults who have lived these experiences, who have come out as we do with our team, that's how we're able to work with kids who not just who struggle with substance use disorder, truancy, suspensions, fightings, but also those who are most violent.
Thank you. I see we have a question from Rich Randolph.
Sorry about that, Angela. I had a little bit of an issue. I want to thank all the panelists for coming out. Dr. Warren, this is for you. Loved your video. One thing you did highlight and you're known for in Sacramento is partnership and collaboration and thinking outside the box. Everyone is here on this board, but you definitely have done that, and you have definitely reached out with the police department and understand that it's not just one person that's responsible here. We have to work together. It's a community thing. And I just want to reach out to you because I know there was a little bit of backlash for that. And I want to thank you for doing that. As a Black chief on this board, thank you.
Well, thank you. It's necessary. We're about solutions. We can spend time pointing fingers and blaming, or we can get our heads together and figure out how the hell we're going to make this change, because our kids deserve us. They deserve that. They deserve us to come together, to use our brains, to think about how we can resolve some solutions and get it done. And I know it's also been challenging because I work straight from integrity, and our team knows that. And so we want to make sure that when we come together as collaborative partners, that we are genuine, that we are authentic, and we operate from integrity, and we're focusing in on that child, that youth, and their families, because you can't help a kid unless you're helping the parents in the same process. But thank you so much, Rich. I appreciate that.
Thank you. I have a question for Ms. Shields. You had talked about, with respect to diversion, that Black youth are not being offered as much diversion as brown and white youth, I believe, if I got that right. And so my question I had is, where is the weak link then? Where is that happening for all practical purposes? And what are some practical solutions to that from your perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for lifting this in particular, because I feel like it was one of the most important findings that I gleaned from the diversion report back. So Black youth are not being offered diversion at the point of arrest. So there's part of it is also having that law enforcement buy-in so that the diversion is offered to young people who are eligible regardless of race, thinking about equity in that respect. But I also think too, what's really important is Black youth aren't enrolling in diversion even when they are being offered that opportunity. So yes, it's extremely important that we have this buy-in with law enforcement and with communities in order to offer diversion more often to Black youth. But the enrollment part, I think, is more so something that needs to be interrogated around how diversion is being communicated, how it's being offered to these families, and what the outreach looks like. And we know that, like I said, when Black youth are given these opportunities, they enroll, they're completing diversion either as often and as substantially complete as white youth or at even greater rates. But there's some disconnect there with how a diversion is being offered. And from the experience that I've had in talking with young people and with families and hearing from case managers who are a part of these diversion organizations, is that there's just sometimes a lack of clarity about what even diversion is. Maybe it's still involved in the system, or there's just unsure, what are you really offering my young person? There's not clarity around what that really means. And sometimes families may think well, since I'm not sure what that is, I'm going to go with the path that I do know, and whatever we can do to get this situation resolved as soon as possible, and opt out of diversion. So I think it's an opportunity for the Department of Development, who's coordinating these full countywide diversion efforts, but as well as specific communities, to be able to do more of that community outreach, inject more of that community voice into better understanding why Black youth aren't enrolling and why their families are not feeling comfortable with that enrollment, and make those necessary changes.
Great. Thank you very much. Now, I don't know if I see any other board members' hands. Let's see. Yes. Amina Kazi?
Hi, thank you. Just to follow up on the diversion conversation, I'm not sure I understand it completely, Olivia. So if you can help me out. So we're talking about rates, right, of after someone has already entered the system. But I think also what our data shows is that people are people of color, Black and brown people are entering the system and having charges brought against them at disproportionate rate to begin with. So I think one of the underlying assumptions there could be that there are these sorts of false charges, or people are being overcharged in that rate. And if we were to, I think, expect everyone who has, we see this, for example, in the student protest context quite a bit, where people are being put into the system at disproportionate rates to begin with. And if we expect those people then to be diverted versus, for example, trying to fight their charges and to be exonerated in that way. So I wonder if we expect the diversion rate to match, we might actually be kind of reinforcing some of those false arrest and trumped up charges at the outset. And just wanted to kind of understand that a little bit better.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's an extremely important point when we're talking about detention. Like I said, the 96% of youth in our detention facilities who are being held pre-adjudication are Black and brown. And in addition to case processing issues, in addition to the dearth of community-based alternatives that are no reject, eject policies that accept dual status we're seeing Black and brown youth, like you said, entering the system at these disproportionate rates. And diversion, while is an absolutely fantastic opportunity for young people to be sent away from the system, given this second, quote unquote, second chance per se. It's a great resource and a tool. I think, like you said, also addressing the overcharging of Black and brown youth and the tendency to funnel Black and brown youth into the system is extremely important. I think that's where bringing it back to YES teams come in, and when we think about the school to prison pipeline and having youth empowerment and support teams available on school campuses to respond to instances that may have otherwise resulted in a young person being suspended or expelled, or law enforcement being called. I think also something that LA County is starting to do that needs to be reinforced and lean into more is having a representative from the DA's office actually there at the point of a young person being brought into the detention facility, so that these charges can be reviewed before the young person is then incarcerated, and a determination can be made earlier on in the system around whether or not that detention is necessary. LA County absolutely relies on detention way more than necessary. I mean, we're thinking about safety and we're young people, what they need. I mean, detention is really just so that the young person comes back to court when they're supposed to, and doesn't get rearrested. Like that's what, when we think about detention, what it's supposed to serve. But that doesn't mean a young person needs to be imprisoned in that situation. There very much needs to be investment in community spaces where young people can, in the meantime, receive the resources, the care, and their families receive the resources, the care that they might need, and still, whatever, and end up going back to court when they need to. But relying on detention and funneling youth into the system absolutely is a huge problem. And I think we need to be careful with avoiding net widening as well with diversion. So yeah, I'll pause there because I see Nancy's hand, and I know Nancy could probably add a lot more to that.
I see Nancy.
Ooh, forgot to unmute. Thank you. I was going to add that there has been discussion on this panel and the last panel around missing data, which is also why I appreciate this report, because that's y'all trying to add to those holes in data. But data really tells us like what is going on with, and how can we like prevent stuff, right? What trajectory will this young person go towards if this decision is made at this point in this young person's life? And so I think as many stop points, like checkpoints in between a final decision being made, like what is happening there? What's going on with the data at that point, which may lead to this next stop, right? So if I think about just like traffic incidences, a young person getting stopped there, from there maybe being referred to probation, or then at the point of a judge, I think judges are so critical in this conversation too, because they are such a determining factor of a young person's trajectory. So does a judge have access to like a menu of options of like, okay, you know what, instead of locking up this young person, there is this service that exists within the community. It's the judge knows about it well, like there's a relationship that's built there. I think all of this is rooted in relationship building. It's so important. So yeah, to Olivia's point, and just to add to it, your question, Amina, I think having people in the conversation that are along this trajectory of this young person's life, and we can get a better like picture of that with data that shows a little bit more of those stop points along the way. And I see your hand.
Is it Dr. Warren? I see your hand.
Yes, I want to add to that, and I'm hoping there's going to be another opportunity. I wish we can all be in the same room, in the same space. We created a program called Educate the Educator, bridging decision makers to neighborhood knowledge. And it's so critical that we continue this conversation, but it doesn't start when they're getting in trouble. I mean, look at the data regarding preschool suspensions for Black boys. If we can start there, that we're not just looking at challenges with law enforcement, but with educators, with hospital systems. How you see somebody determines how you treat them. And if we're looking at little Black boys at such a young age as being criminals and not as young kids who may be struggling, if we don't have that conversation, the trauma is not just with those who are suffering, it's those who provide service. And if you look at the original ACE study, it was actually with mostly college educated white women who had insurance, but they never included racism or poverty in the whole adverse childhood experiences study. And they have a lot of scholarly articles are showing that now. But if we have that conversation, we can start doing prevention at the in the infancy stages and not wait until they become youth. I had a kid that drowned a dog, and I got a phone call and says he's not old enough to be incarcerated yet. He's only 11. Well, God's sakes, he's old enough to get mental health support. He's old enough to pull them aside and say, baby, what happened to you? So we can get them support. Dad was living on the street, and mom died of a drug overdose, and the kid was wandering languishingly, trying to figure out where to go. So he came to one of our team members to get support. We have to see our kids differently if we're going to treat them differently.
Thank you. See, I don't see any other hands raised. And I think, Aisha, we're just at our 20-minute mark.
That's right. Perfect timing again. So with that, co-chairs, board members, and panelists, we want to thank you all And please, 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 if you have time, please stay on to hear the final panel when we come back from the break. And again, we appreciate you taking your time to participate, share, encourage, and educate. So many in this space, and we see we have 98 people signed up for this today's full board meeting. So with that, we will take a 5-minute break. Co-Chair Sierra, is that
Yes,
fine?
that would be,
Okay.
that'd be terrific. So we'll see everybody at 5 to 2. Thank you. Thank you all.
Bye.
Hi, and good afternoon, everyone. We want to get this panel started very quickly, so we ask board members to please come back on camera. I know it's been a long day, but this will be our last panel for the day, and then we'll jump into some board discussion. So we'd ask everyone to please come on camera, or board members to please come on camera, and our presenters as well. I'm seeing a few of our presenters who are already ready to go. So hopefully we can get folks back on camera. We can get started here very shortly. We're really looking forward to this last panel discussion, and we're really thankful for all of the discussion that's taken place so far. So we're really excited to get this last panel to you all, and then to get some of your feedback on the report this year, and maybe some inspiration or some ideas have come out of this panel as well. We certainly hope that that's the case. We've just had some amazing presenters who are connected with our community and are connected with the movement, who I think will really inform this year's report. So again, we ask all board members to please come back on camera so we can count you for quorum, and we will get started as soon as we can. And with that, I will turn it back over to Aisha Martin Walton to take us to our next panel.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. If you're just joining us, we are on agenda item 11 for the RIPA full board meeting. And we'd like to welcome our third and final panel, which will be discussing minimizing community harm and model policies for youth and police interactions. The three panelists today are Lene Wilson, Senior Staff Attorney with the American Civil Liberties Union, ACLU of Northern California, Lisa Thoreau, who you heard earlier. She is the Executive Director at Strategies for Youth, and Mr. Walt Allen, who is a Police Academy Director of the Basic Academy Training at Rio Hondo College. So please, panelists, help us. Your presentation should be 10 minutes. And remember that the board will have an opportunity to ask you questions at the end. So with that, we'd like to go ahead and get started with Ms. Nelson, if you are ready.
Great, thank you. Good afternoon, board members. I'm actually joined by someone else as well who will be co-presenting with me. Thank you for inviting us to speak with you today on the topic of minimizing community harm to youth. My name is Linnea Nelson. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a senior staff attorney with the Racial and Economic Justice Program at the ACLU Foundation of Northern California and a statewide co-lead of the Education Equity Team. I'm joined today by student activist Helen Ho, who will introduce herself as well.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Helen Ho, and I'm a rising junior at Narbonne High School, located in LUSD. I'm also a proud student leader within Youth Liberty Squad, where we advocate for educational equity and health equity for all students in LUSD, as well as a student leader in a coalition called Student Deserves, Ending the School to Prison Pipeline.
Our area of expertise is specifically around educational equity for youth in California's schools. We deeply appreciate the work the board has done in previous years, and especially want to recognize the recommendations from the 2024 annual RIPA report that, taken together, reinforce that police officers should not be stationed in schools as a continuous presence. Rather, that funding for law enforcement in schools should be reinvested, as recommended by the board in the 2024 report, to resources that promote safe environments for and improve services to students, such as family resource navigators, school climate advocates, restorative justice staff, credible messengers, community counselors, and other mental health supports for students. And that, as recommended previously, school staff should only contact law enforcement without prior approval in circumstances involving an immediate threat to school safety or imminent risk of serious physical harm to students or staff. Our suggestions today to the board to consider for the coming year's report build on those previous RIPA report recommendations and are intended to address situations where outside law enforcement is called to the school and/or where police engage with youth outside the presence of the young person's parent or caregiver. We also presume as a foundation for this discussion the already existing legal protections for youth. For example, that youth shall be given access to legal counsel prior to custodial interrogation. There are problems with implementation of those new legal protections across California, as has been discussed previously, and we don't mean to suggest otherwise by not addressing that right now. Rather, that we all agree that these are the laws that California's law enforcement officers should be following, and that there may be additional recommendations from presenters before us about how to better ensure implementation with fidelity of those new laws. So with that default presumption, we bring to the board some ideas from our work for how to minimize community harm from policing youth that apply within and outside the context of, outside the school context. Would you go to the next slide, please? So our first recommendation is that the legislature should bar third-party software vendors who have contracts with school districts from granting themselves the authority to notify law enforcement or granting law enforcement direct access to student data if they believe students are threatening harm, including self-harm or allegedly committing a legal violation. I want to give two examples of this. I'm going to talk about the first one, then Helen's going to talk about the second one. The first one is that there's a third-party software vendor. They sell this software called Gaggle that many school districts have bought and installed on laptops that they give to students. This terms of service from Gaggle has language that if Gaggle suspects that there is some kind of risk of harm, including self-harm, that they will notify law enforcement. Gaggle is not qualified to make those determinations, and this has had concrete harmful impacts on students and their families. We are aware of at least one instance in Southern California where the flag from Gaggle resulted in police being sent to a student's home because the student was playing a video game on their school-issued computer, and Gaggle detected what they thought was violence, which was actually just a message that the student was sending to a friend who was also playing the same video game. This is inappropriate and had harmful, traumatic effects on both the student and their parents. And I want to turn it to Helen to discuss the LASER app in LAUSD.
The LASER app can be used by anyone, students, teachers, parents, and even strangers, to report youth for suspicious behavior leading to a culture of suspicion in our schools. The LASER app criminalizes mental health crises by classifying them as suspicious behaviors reportable to the school police. This will make it difficult for students who need the help that they seek. In addition, the LASER app relies on a behavioral surveillance, a practice that is disproven by a means of maintaining safety. Behavioral surveillance programs, as implemented by LAPD, have been shown to simply be a proxy of racial profiling and will also foster an environment of animosity among peers, among teachers, and among school police themselves. In addition, the app will reinforce a culture of doxing, and this can easily be a tool of cyberbullying. The app can be weaponized as a mass report vulnerable to youth and forced to an encounter with the school police. This means that issues that fall into mental health categories, fentanyl overdoses and school shooters that demand real community-based plans and real solutions will not, this app will not be a solution towards any of those issues that I see in schools myself and whom my friends as well as my teachers witness on a daily basis. Thus we ask, what is LAUSD trying to hide? The community demands records about the surveillance apps. Why is the school district being so secretive about it?
Thank you, Helen. And could we go to the next slide, please? Our second recommendation is around parental notification or caregiver notification. The legislature should require that when police are called to schools prior to any student being questioned, arrested, booked, restrained, or secluded by a law enforcement officer, The student's parent or guardian or caregiver shall be called and given a reasonable opportunity to be present prior to the questioning, arrest, booking, restraint, or seclusion, unless the student is a suspected victim of child abuse in the home. And I want to give an example here. We have a lawsuit against Pittsburgh Unified up here in Northern California and against the state educational agencies. And in that case, one of our plaintiffs, her daughter, who is a Black child with disabilities, was in 6th grade when she was 11 years old, she walked out of her 6th grade classroom in frustration because of something that had happened. And shockingly, the district staff 5150'd her in response. They claimed that she had a mental health crisis. They called the police, forced this child, an 11-year-old child with disabilities, to be strapped to a gurney and had her transported to a psychiatric hospital. The first notification that anyone in her family received about this was from the nurse at the hospital, who called her mother, Jessica Black, and said, "Please come and get your baby. I don't know why she's here." This is probably the #1 issue that we get just so much outrage and shock from parents who contact the ACLU when their children are handcuffed, questioned in school, and they are not notified. In another recent intake that we had, there was, again, a middle schooler who is a student in a special day class, another Black child who was left alone in the school office. He wandered into the nurse's office and then wandered back out. School staff came back in and they said, "What do you have in your pockets?" He said, "Nothing." They demanded that he empty his pockets. He said, "I don't have anything." They called the police got involved, handcuffed him, searched him. He didn't have anything. Instead of thinking about his safety first, instead of trying to notify his mother, instead they handcuffed him and then they sent him back to class. And the first that his mother heard of it was when he came home and he had marks on his wrists from the handcuffs. Helen, I don't know if there's anything you wanted to add here.
Oh, yes. I was going to add that I'm in a school where there's a big population of Black, Brown, Asian, Muslims, color. And recently, my campus has deployed school police because there's been recent fights and discrepancies like that the school deems as conflicts. And in order to de-escalate those conflicts, police will be deployed on school campuses, and they will detain the students. And there's this one incident where I had a friend, and he was Hispanic, and he did get arrested because he was a bystander, right? But he got arrested and he was put on interrogation, and his parents weren't notified of anything, but only the students were. But because it was confidential, we couldn't say anything. And because of the because of how fear-mongering everything would be if we shared information to everyone, he decided not to tell anyone. But when his parents asked him, he did tell the truth, and his parents did go to the office, and they did ask for more information on his interaction with the police, but they were left with very untransparent recalls of what happened, and I feel like the system should meet the needs of parents, guardians, and caregivers that have experienced a similar situation like this.
Thank you so much, Ms. Nielsen and Ms. Ho. Regrettably, we are out of time. Thank you so much for your powerful presentations and for joining the board today. And so please stay on with us. I would like to turn it back over to co-chair Sierra, who will direct us further.
Yes, thank you, Aisha. So I know right now we were hoping to conclude our meeting by 3 o'clock and have public comment prior to then. And since we are running a little bit over, we are thinking of, I'm suggesting that we move up public comment at the end of this panel. Or is that what you were asking about?
Yes, I'm so sorry. We have 2 more speakers.
Yes.
I'm so,
Okay.
so sorry. Please forgive me. We
No, it's
have,
okay.
we have
I was-
Miss Lisa Thoreau. I was looking at my notes. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Who is the Executive Director at Strategies for Youth, and then also Mr. Walt Allen. So
Yeah.
Lisa, if you are ready, please go ahead, and you have 10 minutes. Thank you.
Okay, and I'll just to jump in just to finish my thought that at the end of the presentations, we can then talk about public comment and then come back to the questioning. So thank you. I'll turn it over to Lisa.
Thank you very much for inviting me to speak with the advisory board. I run Strategies for Youth, and we're a national nonprofit policy and training organization dedicated to ensuring the best outcomes for youth when they interact with law enforcement. And our mission, if you could advance 2 slides, please, is to basically go upstream. We want to work with the gatekeepers of the juvenile justice system to reduce arrests and system involvement and escalation of incidents as well as use of force. And to do this, we want to equip law enforcement officers and law enforcement agencies with how to use developmentally appropriate practices through training and through model law enforcement policies. And we also want to educate young people about how to navigate some of these interactions with law enforcement, but also with their peers to avoid legal jeopardy. If we go to the next one. So I'm going to show you a picture of teens that you saw before. And to be sure, this is not limited to teens, but they are the essential definition of immature. Their brains are not completed forming. We're lucky if it's done by 25, and some of us are lucky ever to have it happen. As a result, there are things they don't get. We play something called Juvenile Justice Jeopardy with young people, and I hope some of you can either lead it or play it with us once, because you will see how little young people understand key matters like abstractions and laws, things like constructive possession or joint venture law. For one thing, they're also reactive, and they respond often before they think and react sometimes with action before they think. Finally, they're uninformed. While we're a country that believes a lot in rights, we don't equally make young people aware of what puts them in legal jeopardy and what their legal obligations are. So because of this, we have young people who are sometimes very quick to react, quick to think they've been harmed. Sometimes they have been harmed and are scared it's going to happen again. And all these factors have to, we think, be viewed through the prism of adolescent development, and that this is normative behavior, and we don't want to necessarily take the sole response of arrest. Instead, we want law enforcement also to recognize that they must be educators and explain how to stay within the guardrails of acceptable behavior. So our undergirding or overarching theory is that, if we can go to the next slide, it's important for anyone who works with youth, and certainly law enforcement, to be using some form of developmental competence and to understand what is developmentally appropriate and likely, how to understand what it means to be trauma-informed, and how to promote equitable approaches. We believe this is necessary for the individual officer, and that officer must be equipped by the agency they work in as well as the system generally, and they have to be supported and treated respectfully for using developmentally appropriate responses. And this is critical, we think, if you're going to see better outcomes with youth. Right now, though, if we can go to the next slide, officers are often ill-equipped to work with youth. The U.S. Supreme Court, if you don't believe me, has really made clear that the teen brain is quite different. It has accepted the neuroscience and research on this topic, starting with a decision in 2005, reiterating it in 2011, and so forth. But we find that most law enforcement agencies don't have policies that necessarily distinguish youth from adults. And not all states require youth-specific training at the academy or in service. And sadly enough, the training in California in the Basic Academy is rather limited about youth. It's focused on the laws regarding youth, and the policies we've seen from Lexipol that have been adopted by several agencies do not really focus on why the law is different for youth and how a deeper understanding of adolescent development will help you navigate interactions with youth in a multitude of interactions. And I'm referring specifically to the temporary custody of juveniles policy that Lexipol issues. The problem is, if we can go to the next slide, if you don't have policies or training, law enforcement officers are going to depend on pre-existing biases and beliefs and those of their peers in the law enforcement agency. And this is normal. We see this with teachers. We see this with everybody who deals with youth, but it comes with sometimes serious impacts and perhaps explains some of the ongoing disparities in use of various responses to youth, be it diversion, be it arrest, be it citations. Next slide, please. And frankly, there are several things that can go wrong. If you don't have some of that training or experience, some officers get it automatically. Encounters escalate, there are a lot of unreasonable stops and searches, and there are unnecessary arrests. There's also excessive use of force and sometimes coerced or false confessions, all of which have lasting impacts. And a summary cursory review of federal lawsuits indicates that the Ninth Circuit has seen 32 lawsuits for use of force against youth in a state that is equipped with more policies than other states, to be sure. And yet, 3 decisions by California's appellate courts have indicated that some key understanding about how to interrogate a youth and what you must do and how to understand custody are still not quite understood. If we could go to the next slide. Officers need training, and I think officers want training. They want a solid understanding of laws and policies that govern their actions, and this is necessary to effectively serve their communities. And they have to, I think, understand, appreciate the perspectives and experiences of the communities they serve, which can be essential to getting cooperation and trust working with the community, or at least collaboration in some things. And we know different communities ask their children to treat officers differently. Some communities do not feel that officers should be disrespected. Other communities feel that officers cannot be trusted and should be held at arm's length. Next one, please. Whatever, you have to be ready for that, and you have to be able to anticipate what's going on. Our training focuses on brain development, on trauma, and mental health issues law enforcement officers are likely to encounter. And we also look at the demographic factors that might bring a youth into the orbit of an officer. We also review juvenile law because this is an esoteric area and it is not something most law enforcement officers are well aware of. They don't often go testify in court.
Ms. Farrell, I am so sorry to have you wrap up at this time, but thank you so very much for your presentation earlier and your presentation right now. And I'm sure the board would love to have a copy of your information. So thank you again and your patience. And at this point, I would like to turn it over to our last speaker, Mr. Walt Allen, who is the Academy Director. Good morning. Good afternoon.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be with you today, and I will try not to go over my time because you have some other things you have to attend to. But I've been truly blessed with being in the law enforcement environment for the last 48 years. As a police officer, also as a director of former director of the California Youth Authority, which at the time was the largest correctional system in the country, and then currently as a director of a police academy here at Rio Hondo College in Whittier, California. what I did want to talk about briefly was my stint with the California Youth Authority as the director. The day I was sworn in as the new director under Governor Schwarzenegger, I inherited a pretty large mess. My hand was shaken by the governor's staff, and then the chief counsel came up to me and he said, I want to congratulate you on being the recipient and the defendant in the largest lawsuit in the history of the Department of Corrections in California. What I inherited was illegal conditions of confinement, inadequate medical and mental health care, inadequate educational services, inadequate substance abuse and sex offender treatment programs, illegal denial of training, treatment, and rehabilitation. So I started a journey on really having an understanding of the juvenile system in California and what we were not doing at the state level with handling the incarcerated wards that we were charged to taking care of. The average age of incarcerated wards in the Youth Authority was 17 years of age. Most of the wards I had no more than a fourth grade education. Most of the wards I had serious mental health and abuse experiences that they had before they were incarcerated. Many were heavy substance abusers. And as I indicated, lots of mental health issues. Most of my offenders had committed 10 or more criminal offenses before they were incarcerated by the counties to the California Youth Authority. What we did is develop a series of remedial plans to handle each of the areas of concern. And the bottom line is that we had some of the youth that did not even belong in the California Youth Authority. There was a decision by the state legislature and the governor's office is to send, to change over to the Juvenile Justice Division and make an effort to send these youthful offenders back to the counties where they could receive much better treatment and services and rehabilitative services. And I warned everyone that if you're going to send these youthful offenders to the county, they're going to need the services. And many of the problems we see in some of our county probation officers is a reflection of the fact that those services were not available and the funding was not provided to handle the rehabilitative services and programming that these young people need. So I just want to mention that we have a tremendous problem in our counties, not having the funding to provide these rehabilitative services, the drug treatment services, all of these type of services that are needed. Wraparound services are the only way intensive wraparound services to provide the appropriate services that these young people need. So the other hat that I wear is that I've been a city councilman and mayor for the city of Covina for the last 25 years. So what are we doing at the local level? First of all, there should not be a cookie cutter approach. I know that one of the presenters, and I can agree with some things, but we actually have school resource officers in our high schools. We don't have the problems that some of the other communities are having. We have an outstanding relationship with the high school administrators and our K-12 schools in our city. Not only that, one of the big instruments we have in terms of diversion for our youth is we have a youth accountability panel that's comprised of healthcare, mental health care professionals, psychologists, and folks that are involved in the juvenile diversion process. And our objective in our community is to keep our young people out of the criminal justice system. And we have been very, very successful. And I just want to touch on that because some communities, I know the city of Pomona had school resource officers. They got rid of them. And now we hear that they want to bring them back. So we think that it's been a real good safety measure for our kids and for our community. Now, since I have very little time left, I suspect.
Yes.
I want to get into what I'm doing as a director of the Police Academy. I love what Lisa has presented. Little did I know, our juvenile law instructor actually has palled up with Erica Reynoso, who is with the Department of Mental Health, to deal with the issues of brain development and passing that information on to our recruits in the academy. We have a 6-month academy. We have 43 different learning domains, and one of them is juvenile law and procedures. In talking with Lisa and talking with my primary juvenile law and procedures instructor, we are moving in that direction. I like what Lisa's doing. I think it's an excellent idea to bring that into the academy. We already have cultural diversity. We already have all the information regarding racial profiling and what not to do. We all already have procedural justice in the academy, and we present to our communities guardians of society, not warriors. And the 41 academies, I think, are well ahead of the rest of the country in terms of coming up with innovative ways to make these police officers, when they leave here, community-based police officers. So with that, is that quick enough for you?
That is.
I wish I had more time, but I'm willing to take any questions you may have. I've had a wonderful career, and I get where everybody's coming from. I had a great time listening to the presenters today, and I take that back to us so we can make things better in our community and the academy.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Allen, and for your years of service and experience and all of the panels on panel 3, minimizing community harm. So we have heard criminalizing youth behavior, investing upstream, and minimizing community harm. So with that, thank you, everyone, and I will turn it back over to Co-Chair Sierra.
Yes, thank you, Aisha, and thank you, board members, so much. As I mentioned earlier, given our timeline, I'm going to suggest that we move up our agenda item 14, public comment, to now before the board. I open it up for the board to ask the panel members questions. I hope that will work for our panel members. And if others on the board agree, if someone would like, we need actually a motion to open it up for public comment and a quick vote, and then we can do public comment and then return back to our questions for the panelists. If anybody is interested and wants to make a motion.
Can I move that we open up to public comment? Thank you.
Yes, do I hear a second?
Second.
Great, and if our DOJ staff can take a vote?
Certainly. Dobard.
Aye.
Green. Aye. Green.
Aye.
Guerrero.
Aye.
Hawkins.
Aye.
Kennedy.
Aye.
Kajabi.
Aye.
Kulkarni.
Aye.
Kazi.
Aye.
Randolph.
Aye.
Sierra.
Aye.
Smith.
Yes.
Tulise.
Aye.
Vang.
Aye.
The ayes have it.
Great, thank you so much. Okay, so I'll turn it over to our co-chair, Andrea Guerrero, for to open it for public comment.
Thank you, Angela. So we've had a action-packed meeting today. We are eager to hear from the public on what you've heard so far, or if you want to speak to the draft report, you could do that as well in the interest of time. If you are from Southern California, if you could raise your hand or speak up, let us know that you're interested in saying something. All right, Dr. Glover, why don't you go ahead? Dr. Glover, if you want to come off of your mute and speak.
Hi, and just a gentle reminder, public comment will be limited to 2 minutes, just to give everyone time to speak today. Sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to politely remind folks of that. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, Dr. Glover. Okay, we'll come back to you. Dr. Hilton.
Dr. Hilton, I used to be mocked by people who called me Dr. Hilton. I liked it. We had much discussion today, and the discussion seems to reinforce these notions of the belligerent Blacks, whether they be young. Well, today we're talking about the young ones, and I resent it. I resent it deeply, simply because this is about racial profiling, the disparities experienced by people, in this case, young people, and there was no discussion of what this board sees in the disparities and what this board intends to do about it. I put it to you that the items that I've discussed before, items regarding the quality of the data, impinges and influences everything that this board has done and shall do and what it recommends. I think that's all I have to say today. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Jessica Ellis.
Hello, sorry, I'm having tech issues. Hopefully you can hear me.
Yes,
my name
go
is,
ahead.
Yeah, sorry for no camera. My name is Jessica Ellis, Executive Director at Sentinel Youth Services. And our work has reduced school-based arrests by 95%. I really want to thank the members of this committee for acknowledging that police should be an absolute last resort contact for youth, if at all. I understand RIPA is focused on the specific laws and policies that govern police stops. The report could benefit from noting the systemic drivers that perpetuate law enforcement being used in the first place. As the saying goes, if the only tool you have is a hammer, you tend to see every problem as a nail. So it would be important for the report to ask, why do we only have a hammer on hand? Some examples will include, and I will forward this information on to the committee, the funding streams. Our schools have to choose between a teacher or a counselor in their Department of Education funding formulas, but they can get separate federal and state grants to afford police. Funding for school police far outstrips funding for school counselors. There are 10 million youth in this country who have a police officer at their school and not a single social worker. The California Department of Ed requires all schools to submit a school site safety plan. The various legislative requirements that guide this document focus only on policies, issuing policies and consequences for violating those policies, and a reactionary response to harm after it has occurred. And it assumes school police or SROs as a given in its wording. It has nothing about best practices that keep harm and violence from actually occurring, and none of the preventative things that are focused around brain-based or trauma-informed research. Third, group homes claim that their insurance companies require them to call police to report on things like property damage or youth leaving without permission, which is a big part of the driver of our foster youth ending up in contact with police heavily. In a couple of our law enforcement jurisdictions, two group homes account for 1,000 calls to one small police department that we work with. So in a year. So I really encourage the report to look at these systemic policy drivers that push us to calling police. And as one of the chiefs acknowledged, once we're called, we're expected to do something. So we're putting it on them when we can really fix these policies to not be calling them in the first place. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Dr. Glover, I'm not sure if you're still on, but if you want to try again. Go ahead.
Thank you, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, yay, good. Okay, so just for time, I'll just send some notes to the RIPA board because I know we're short on time. But what I wanted to just say is I'm starting to do a little work with some folks on the California Racial Justice Act, and RIPA data is starting to show up in that work. So I just wanted to share that, and thank you so much for your hard work and the youth emphasis today, given the really disturbing report. The youth emphasis today was well worth it. Thank you so much for bringing this very lively discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Any members of the public from Central California who would like to speak? You could raise your hand on the screen or step forward. Okay, let's go to Northern California. Are there members of the public from Northern California that would like to speak? Any other members of the public who would like to speak? Okay, seeing none, hearing none, I think we can then open it up for board members to ask questions of the panelists or provide comments. Board Member Kajabi.
I just want to ask very quickly, I noticed that I think the final slides in both the ACLU and the Strategies for Youth presentations included some recommendations. I think from the ACLU, a third recommendation that we didn't get to. And so I just invite you, I hope the slides will be shared with any other material with the board. Thank you.
Yes, that would be great. There was so much great information shared today. Board Member Randolph.
I'd like to thank all the board members, or I'm sorry, all the panel members that came out today. Thank you so much. Ms. Nelson, I just had some questions for you on the ACL, I'm sorry, for the gaggle. So I was an SRO for 5 years, so I handled probably over 200 gaggle alerts. And I just wanted to kind of provide an educational component for members that heard the gaggle discussions. And I understand your concerns. LA Unified, one of the largest school districts in the country. We've got over 900 school districts in this state, all different diversity, different communities, different relationships with their communities, and different relationships with their police department. But on gaggle is structured through that particular school district. So they could choose to notify their law enforcement if they choose to. So I'm glad that you brought it up, and I'm sorry there's litigation going right now, but I will tell you some gaggle alerts I could say it's law enforcement's choice to take action. And I will say some of the gaggle alerts I got, and just further clarification for those members that are on the panel or on the board, a student uses all kinds of different systems to communicate, to do homework, to do projects. And there are special keywords that will alert through gaggle, like Ms. Nelson outlined, which I'm glad she did. Guns, okay, which could be misconstrued to, Johnny's talking about a gun, Johnny's talking about shooting a school, things of that nature. The administrator is the one with the SRO. The administrator 9 times out of 10 will make that determination. We're not going to look into this. Or the administrator will talk to that teacher. It could be someone reciting a song, lyrics in a song, or doing a report or whatnot. But there have been things where I would see where a student's talking to another student, they said they were touched inappropriately by a family member, and flags like that I was touched inappropriately, or I was beat up, or I have been beat up. So sometimes Gaggle, I mean, depending on how it's streamlined and how it's outlined, does provide a valid source, and it's through how it's streamed to the administration and law enforcement. The other thing I wanted to outline for Ms. Lisa, you've definitely, thank you so much for talking about partnership and collaboration. I do want to outline some of your information was inaccurate. To be a school resource officer, you need to complete training in our state. That's number one. Number two is the majority of our school districts will run that officer through a panel, which is sometimes involves a school district member or counselors if they think that they're a fit for that particular community. As a chief, I have to tell you, one of the greatest amounts of liability, we all walk liability, is our schools. You want an officer to be a part of that community, and you want to make sure that they're going to respect the rights of juveniles. And the learning domain for post juvenile crimes is quite extensive. And once again, I mean, I'm glad you brought things up. We talked about training, the training academy for Massachusetts, 20 weeks. In California, 30 weeks. And a lot of that has to do with our juvenile component. But thank you all for coming out today.
May I just respond, or not permitted?
Unfortunately, public comment is public comment, and now we're on to board member questions. I guess we are in the question phase. Sorry. So yes, if it could be brief, that would be great. Less than 2 minutes, please. Lisa, if you want to respond, you can respond if it's brief.
I just was saying I wasn't discussing school resource officers. I was discussing patrol officers. And
okay. Go ahead. Did you want to say more?
I'll leave it there for the time being.
Okay. All right. Board member Chauncey Smith.
Yes. Thank you to all the panelists. Greatly appreciate the presentation. I have a couple questions, but I did want to see if Linnea wanted to respond to the thoughts about Gaggle, because this is new to me, so it would be helpful just to get a full understanding of what Gaggle is and you know what you have to say in response to what the chief offered up.
Thank you. I can just say briefly that our recommendation is focused on not granting that discretion to Gaggle or third-party software vendors, and also to having the law enforcement response not be an automatic thing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And if I may, I had a couple other questions separate from that in relationship to the same recommendation that you offered up, Linnea, and also Helen wanted to chime in too. So one was in the recommendation, the second one, it said, you know, prior to a student being questioned, arrested, booked, restrained, secluded by law enforcement, have the parent or guardian called to be present. Is that right? Now, one question I had is, what about searches? Because you had that list of different activities, and I'm wondering about searches, particularly because in some of the work that we have done in the past, we work with other organizations, and in the field, they've told us that when youth are being searched from the standpoint of the youth being physically touched by an adult, it can feel inappropriate, regardless of whether they're allowed to do it. So that's one question. You have these different activities that would be covered, detained, so on and so forth. What about searches?
Yes,
and
I'm sorry,
also,
it was intended that searches would be included in that list.
Okay, got it. Thank you. Appreciate the clarification. And then the other point was the recommendation is limited to schools, but then, you know, we heard from public comment, I think it was Jessica or someone from Centinela Youth Services, that law enforcement contacts with youth raise numerous challenges and potential harms, irrespective of whether a youth is at school or not. And based on that fact, I'm wondering, what about the implication of having that same recommendation apply in other contexts?
Yeah, thank you for raising that. And again, because my focus is on educational equity, I'm so often used to talking about youth in schools that sort of put an unduly narrow focus on that recommendation. But yes, we would definitely support that recommendation that be extended to situations outside of the school.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Board Member Sierra, Board Chair Sierra.
Yes, thank you. Following up on the same recommendation, the caregiver notification, just two questions. First is, are you aware of any school district that has adopted a policy kind of like this? Maybe not exactly, but like this, and which districts are those? And also, with respect to your recommendation, as your organization considered like other exceptions, I mean, you have an exception as to whether the child may be a victim of child abuse, but for example, an exception based on exigent circumstances that may be happening that require a law enforcement response more immediately.
So yes, thank you for the question. So as to the first question, this was an issue that I think was the very first one that got Black Organizing Project really involved in Oakland Unified and limiting the law enforcement presence and impact on students there almost over a decade ago now, was specifically on this issue of students being routinely stopped, questioned, searched, arrested, and there being no parental notification. So my understanding is that Oakland Unified did adopt that more recently. But again, Black Organizing Project would be the one to ask about that. And I'm so sorry, your second question, I apologize.
About an exceptions to, for example, with respect to exigent circumstances.
Yeah,
built
so
into the recommendation.
yes. So there is, for example, we understand and appreciate that there may be true emergencies where there's an imminent physical risk of serious bodily injury or death to a student or to somebody at the school, where that would be an exigent circumstance where it may be necessary to act sooner. But the vast majority of the times that students are stopped, searched, questioned by law enforcement officers are not those exigent circumstances. And I put a link to sort of a model harm reduction policy that explains that. Obviously, I didn't want to put everything in that slide because then it gets very text heavy, but there's a more full detailed explanation of that recommendation in there.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Board Member Tulise.
Good afternoon. I just want to thank Ms. Ho for being on this. I absolutely love when the youth are engaged. We have a very robust Police Explorer and a cadet program and ROTC. So if I could direct a question to Ms. Ho, if I understood correctly, you believe that before the police encounter youth in this situation that the parents should be notified, correct? So hypotheticals help me at times. So if let's say you have a large male student who's blocking you from entering your classroom in the morning, how would you like to proceed? Are you going to wait for the parents, his guardian or his parent to show up before you can go into the classroom that morning, or what would be your plan?
I think to answer your question, I feel that the presentation was more pertained to students who were like interrogated by police officer. And I think if I were like in that type of situation, I wouldn't know how to respond because it hasn't happened to me. But also, I just wanted to speak upon like parental like discretion, right? So just alerting their guardian before any police like encounter is like valid, because students, even though police officers do have the authority to talk to students or to have a search without a warrant, right? These issues like need to be like addressed first to like their parents, so then they can go through that process. But if that answered your question.
I mean, it does, because exactly is most people don't know how to solve the problems that law enforcement is faced with. Has been my point since being appointed to RIPA, which is it's easy to state problems, but we need to have solutions. We expect a police officer to get you into that classroom, correct? You have a right to learn. You have a right to be seated, to be in that classroom safely. And if the guidance counselor or whoever can't move that student peacefully, they're going to call the police. Now, for how long are we going to go on with no kid entering their classroom? Because, you know, you see my point, we can extrapolate the problem. Police have to solve problems. The police have to solve problems, and we have to have tools and support to solve them. Now, once that person is detained, I agree 100%. In fact, existing law, California Penal Code 625.6, already clearly states that we can't interview or interrogate a juvenile without their parent or attorney present. They can't even waive it. So that problem's been resolved. That problem's been resolved by the legislature. And so, again, think about the solution and the people that have to solve them. And that's us. At the end of the day, when there's nobody left, it's the police.
There's something I would like to add. So thinking about your question again, right? Because I am in a classroom right now. So if that were to happen to me, I would, you know, call like the nearest staff member, teacher, because if the teacher was like hypothetically inside the room, right? And if she or him witnessed that, you know, some student is causing some type of discrepancy, then they would have to intervene, right? But I don't think, I personally don't think calling the police because of those minor incidents would be the best solution. But I do think police should only intervene if there's like a prominent issue that's happening like on campus, and if there's like a gun, if there's like someone who has like some type of weapon, or if there's like a big conflict in schools. But as a high schooler myself, I've seen a lot of conflicts, but I haven't really seen like police like de-escalate any conflicts. From my personal standpoint, as a student, as a youth, as a people, I mean, as a youth, just representing like, you know, my friends and my school, that's just how.
Sure. No, I got you. And you're very fortunate because many schools aren't set up the way that yours is. But, you know, we could play that game, and I won't for the sake of time. But imagine the same student then took your iPhone from you and walked away. At some point, you're going to want the police to intervene. At some point, I'm assuming, at some point. And the question is under what authority and what support do you want the police to intervene when it's nonviolent? We all agree on violence, right? If we have a shooting at our schools, you want the police to come in and neutralize the threat. I hope we agree to that. But if not, but you have a right to a quality of life, Ms. Ho, and that's where we have to find a balance. So it's not just as easy to say, well, we'll just wait for the parents. Because the parents often tell us, I'm not leaving work. You deal with it. He's your problem, Mr. Police Officer. I'm not leaving work. You deal with it. So again, that's what the officers on the street deal with. And we deal with it all the time. There is nobody watching these kids. There's nobody around. The fix is not to handcuff the police. The fix is to put resources in the home, to build homes. I don't mean juvenile homes. I mean strong, resilient family homes to support the youth.
Yes. So I'm
Yeah.
going to move us on. And I apologize, my video has just gone out on me. My video is saying we're coming to the end of the meeting. And so I know that we have one more board member who would like to ask a question. I do want to flag that we are almost at the 3-hour mark. And I don't think we'll have enough time to review the report, but I do want to give these last minutes to the reflection and the rich discussion that we're having. So, Board Member Hawkins, did you have a question?
I did have a question, but it's also a comment. I understand the panelist Helen Ho, and I'm truly sorry that you're having a problem. I think it would be LAPD on Narbonne's campus. Yes. So I'm truly sorry, but I know if you could get my number afterwards, I think we need to talk to the captain at the station. I think that's I don't want to identify them. That we need to talk to them because it's disturbing to me living in that district to hear that is going on. So I believe that the captain would be willing to sit down with you to figure out what can they do to make everyone feel comfortable on campus, because they got to know that you all feel comfortable. You see what I'm saying? And they're not going to abandon you. Like law enforcement just said, they're not going to run. I can tell you that right now. They're not going to run. So if anything, yeah, they're going to come. Yeah. And they're the only people who are going to run towards violence when things do happen, when bad things do happen. And it's sadly that a lot of parents are dependent on law enforcement to raise their youth. Yeah, we just got to be real. They're dependent on them. And it's sad that we have gotten to that point, but we got to be honest. And if you all are feeling this type of way on Narbonne, I'm telling you, get my number and we will talk to the captain together to make sure that he understands here your side from the students. He needs to hear. If they're not feeling comfortable with the officers that they have on the campus, we need to really examine what's happening here. And we need to look at it, like they said, this can't be a cookie cutter. We can't say this for everyone because every campus is different. And so we have to look at them individually and based on the needs of that campus, because every campus is different. Some campus you may have to, have somewhere you're going through metal detectors. It depends.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
but
thank
to be
you so
fair
much.
to all, I think we need to look at it. Thank you and bye.
Okay. Okay, so I want to check with Department of Justice staff because we are moments away from 3 o'clock, and I'm wondering whether we're allowed to extend or say 10 to 15.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you for your question. So we are running a little bit behind, so if board members can stay on, we can continue this discussion as long as we can maintain quorum.
Okay. All right. Let's see how far we get doing that because this is a pretty rich discussion. Are there other board members who would like to jump in? Board Member Kajabi, did I see you indicate you wanted to say? No.
I really was just saying that I'm open to staying an extended time. And if there were time, I had asked if the previous panelists could share their recommendations or recommendation slides. If that were a quick item and there were time for that, that would be great. But I know we're under constraints, but that would be my preference. Thank you.
Yes. Okay, thank you. Yes, we have indicated already that DOJ staff will be reaching out to you for your sources, resources, recommendations, materials, so that we can fold them into our report. Thank you. Any other board members who have a question? And we could do rapid fire reflection after that. Board Member Kennedy.
I did want to say, it's not just one or the other with the resource officers or social workers. Why don't we consider having all the resources available? Because as we look at the statistics, violence is increasing throughout our communities. So we can get some of the money. We can just talk to our federal legislators and say, hey, some of the money you're sending to support wars overseas, let's support our war in our own country and help improve some of our conditions in our schools and some of our critical um, areas in the country to shore up our own country. So that's some conversation we could have as well. But we do need our SROs, we do need social workers on campus. We need a variety of resources on our campuses. Our children are worth it. They're worth every penny of it. And we might want to increase the salaries of our teachers while we're at it.
Thank you. I believe our panelist, Walter Allen, had perhaps you wanted to respond?
Just a real quick note. All of the RIPA board members, come down to Rio Hondo Police Academy. Come down, visit us. Let us show you what we're doing with the 21st Century Police Training here at the Academy. We're one of 41 academies, but we have an open door for you to come down and look at what we're doing, do a tour, and let us show you in detail of what we're doing. And I will say that regarding Mr. Kennedy's comment, we are in full agreement of that as a city councilman. We want all the resources we can get to take care of our kids. And we do have outreach on in our schools aside police, but we need a combination of, it's a village that we use to take care of our children, right? So I totally agree with Mr. Kennedy. We need the school resource officers. We're going to keep them in Covina, but we can take any resources we can get to take care of our children.
Okay, thank you. Board member Amina Kasi.
I think our panelists are still here, so this is just a general question for the last panelists. If anyone has any insight as to, one of the panel discussions talked about trauma-informed approaches in schools, and I'm wondering if those districts that have truly adopted a multifaceted trauma-informed approach, whether or not those schools have opted to also retain school resource officers. Or have they elected not to?
Are there any panelists who would like to respond? Dr. Gina Warren.
Hi, thank you for the opportunity. We did a professional development actually for some faculty so we can provide them real life experiences of our youth. And so, yes, we talked about adverse childhood experiences, but we also talked to them about theirs, because oftentimes you're bringing your own challenges to the workspace. And when now you're triggered by children who are struggling and you're struggling, the same thing with law enforcement, same thing with hospital systems. If we don't recognize that both sides are struggling, because we're human beings, and we fall outside of our professional space. So by educating, not necessarily just training, but educating all folks who serve the community of the life experiences that people endure. So it's not cookie cutter, but it's this particular environment. This particular child's going through this. This particular kid is triggered when they're smelling somebody that has the same cologne as this a person who raped them. This is a person that feels this way. This is why we're seeing kids with substance use disorders. We have to be critical thinkers and start applying appropriate knowledge and not it be just a trauma informed, but it needs to be where we are actually educating, because education is lifelong. Training is static, and we need to have dynamic, constant education regarding these challenges, but it needs to include those who are serving the people.
Thank you. And Linnea Nielsen, I know you have to go. Did you want to respond?
Yes, thank you very much. Just to say that the closest example that I'm aware of is in Oakland Unified, which is working closely with community-based organizations to ensure a variety of resources for students in the classroom, but that does not include the school resource officers. They disbanded their school district police department. And so I think that there's been a real push in that district to put the resources towards positions that are not sworn law enforcement to support students and make them feel safe.
Okay, Board Member Chavang.
Yeah, I also have to go. I'm late for another meeting, but just wanted to thank the student, Helen, for also answering that question. I feel like that question wasn't fair to you, but we also know that the disconnect between the community and also what's impacting students on campus, we should also put it on students to be the champions for themselves. As adults, we are doing everything that we can to really make sure that our students can learn and not worry about anything outside of their learning environment. And so for you to come here and talk about your experience is really greatly appreciated. And I want just to make sure that you feel like this is the space that you are able to talk about the things that you're experiencing and feel validated. So
Yeah, I want to echo that. And if you want to respond, Helen, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you so much, Board Member Yang, and thank you to the board for giving me an opportunity and a platform to, voice out my concerns as a student and just seeing like how people in my community are disproportionately affected by police on school campuses. But I also wanted to say that I'm, I'm just one perspective, right? Like there's many other students from across LUSD, districts that can share similar experiences or experiences on like the end of the spectrum. But yeah, just thank you so much for giving me, this space. And thank you, Liana. I know working with you, I know I've only worked with you for a little bit, but hopefully I get to make more impactful initiatives like this one today. So thank you so much.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you so much for being here. To the panelists, we're going to move on for 5 minutes to the board report and see if we can get any comments from the board about the report, any feedback or input to the staff so that they can move forward. So I'm going to open it up to ask if any of the board members have any input on the draft report that was in the materials. You did have an opportunity to review them in your committee meetings. But I'll turn it to Board Member Mina Kasi.
Hi, thank you for this opportunity. It's such a tremendous document. And as a new board member, and I was not able to attend my committee meeting, so forgive me if this has been covered already. But I think one of the things that came up today was the calls for service and how what happens during calls for service and how that may or may not, the context of those calls for service. So glancing through the report, I don't see that we have disaggregated any of the data with that specific column, or I should say data element, which is the BF data element call for service. And I wonder if that would be helpful for us to do, to note how youth are being treated during calls for service, how many calls for services are youth involved, etc.
Great, thanks for that input. That is something that DOJ can work towards, perhaps, and we'll follow up in committee meetings. Board Member Randolph, did you have a comment about the report?
Yes, I'm sorry. Yeah, yes, I'll be real quick. Just excited with our new board, excited about today. A lot of good conversations. I think we're moving on quite a few things. In the last 2 weeks, I just wanted to share with the board, I know I've echoed it in the past. I went to various departments, about 9, and done RIPA entries at different departments in the Valley and here on the coast, and talked to officers, and also been to an academy, and everyone has echoed about collaboration, and they all want to move forward to end racial discrimination, period, in law enforcement. I think it's important that this board issues, when we issue an annual report and recommendation, that it comes from a place of understanding and appreciation for our job as peace officers and the way law enforcement actually interacts with RIPA and the way the assembly looks at us and the public. For these board members who have ever seen, I just want board members to see what a RIPA form is actually doing when you actually enter it, what's going through a peace officer's mind, getting in a car. And I think we have unlimited access as a board anywhere in the state. And just to create a greater understanding, because I have done it, I still do it. So at this point in time, I'm asking Ms. Guerrero if I could motion to require that the RIPA board, all of us together, participate in a ride-along to actually witness a RIPA entry. Anyone here could pick an agency or wherever they want. And I just, it's all about the collaboration and us. I think people being able to talk to RIPA board members, not confrontational whatsoever. That's not going to happen in this state. I can assure you, anyone on this board has got that title. And if I'm out of line, let me know, Ms. Guerrero. I'd like to make a motion for us to go out and experience putting in a ride along and actually experiencing a RIPA entry with a California law enforcement agency to see it.
Yeah, so Board Member Randolph, you have extended that as a invitation personally, and I know several of us have done that in our local communities. So I think I don't think anyone can mandate our work except for the legislature, and I don't think we can impose that requirement upon ourselves in that way. But what I would suggest is that we get real concrete about your suggestion, so that people, we perhaps you could work with the DOJ staff to identify specific dates or departments where we could do that, and we have to be careful about Bagley Keene as well, right? So we can't really do that together. We have to do that individually. So that's something to keep in mind. But in terms of the logistics of that, would you be willing to work with DOJ staff to think about how logistically that could happen, with some specific people to contact, dates to think about, that sort of thing? Okay,
Absolutely.
I think that would be great. All right. Sorry, Chief Solis. I just see your hand.
Oh, no problem. I would just echo Chief Randolph, but I would just say, I've taken the time to sit down and have lunch with the ACLU in Southern California. I take the time to sit down with various stakeholders that I don't necessarily agree with, them entirely, but to be able to sit down and say, look, can we have lunch? Can we go on a ride along? Can we have a meal, coffee? Just so I can understand the perspective. I'd like to believe that people operate from a thought of good change, even though I don't agree with those groups, and those groups being the ACLU. At least I could sit there and have lunch with them and go, hey, these are good people. I just may not agree with the mission. Maybe they don't agree with the mission of law enforcement, but they would see that the law enforcer is a good person behind the badge, right? And that's what it's always about. But with that, just to piggyback, I would even say do a ride along that proceeds into the evening hours, because I would say most drivers in California probably have tinted windows because of the heat. And then the evening hours, we're being asked to write perceived gender perceived sexual orientation, perceived race, perceived disabilities through tinted windows at night when we fill out RIPA forms. I think you all would benefit from coming out with us and going, where's the sense in that, and why, and how do you actually do that? How does an officer actually perceive these things on night shift before they even make the stop? I mean, how do you do that, right? And so just a learning curve, but with that, I'll yield my time.
Okay, so yes, we have Board Member Randolph who's going to work with DOJ staff to extend that opportunity so that we can have that information. I will say that, you know, that for those of us who've been on RIPA board longer, we got really down into the weeds on what it takes for an officer to do all of this in the first couple of years when we were putting together the regulations. So this is not without this is not new territory for us, but I appreciate we have new members, and we are in acting in a spirit of collaboration. I see Kendall is wants to speak, and I'm sure what she's going to tell us is we've lost quorum. But go ahead, Kendall.
It would help if I was unmuted. That is exactly what I was going to share with the board. But I really do want to thank you all for staying on a little bit longer. It has been a really robust discussion today. On behalf of the DOJ, I do just want to thank all of the panelists for their time and putting their presentations together, coming here before the board and answering and having some difficult conversations. I think this is a great foundation in creating this year's report. We're also looking forward to sharing these PowerPoint presentations with folks, and really for people to be able to review some of those recommendations that folks put forward and bring those into your subcommittees for further discussion. Before we wrap up, I do want to do one more plug for this. We are sending out our survey for the next 2 full board meetings tomorrow. And so we'd ask folks to complete that as soon as possible. We're going to try to notice both the October and November dates at the same time. We hope that that will help folks in planning for winter travel. And we also hope that this will help facilitate the smooth publication of this year's report. So please, 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 again, fill out that survey. Let's get that done. That'll come into your email box first thing tomorrow morning. And with that, I will turn it over to the co-chairs to close this meeting.
Yes, thank you, everyone. We don't have a quorum. We can't do anything else except to say thank you for being here, and to my co-chair, Angela Sierra, for leading the first part of the meeting. We will see you in committee or at the next meeting. Have a great day.
Thank you, great seeing everybody.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you. Great focus.
Bye-bye.
Really appreciate it.
Bye-bye.